So in quantum mechanics, we find something similar about cause and effect, because in quantum mechanics, the assumption is that when we want to measure the properties, complementary properties of space, energy, mass, time, space and energy, or mass and time, for, let's say, a target, subatomic target particle, the way that we do that is by sending a probe element with the duality of particle wave. So we send a probe element that interacts with this target element, and then that creates the target element is assumed to comprise a probability wave function. It's dispersed along a probability wave function before the interaction between the probe element and the subatomic target's assumed probability wave function. And once they interact, that causes the collapse of the probability wave function, of the target's probability wave function, into a singular or single complementary space, energy, time, mass value. So we again have a cause and effect. But the thing is, so that's why I call the old paradigm of relativity theory and quantum mechanics the old mature causal paradigm. But in the new paradigm, which I called the New God's physics paradigm, which I call the acausal computation paradigm, we've done away with cause and effect, material causality, because remember that the UCP computes simultaneously all the points in the universe. Since all the points in the universe are computed simultaneously for each subsequent universal frame, there cannot be any cause and effect within any given frame, nor can there be any cause and effect across any two subsequent frames, because of the dissolution of the whole universe back into the UCP between one frame and another. So that's a very dramatic change. We start realizing that the universe cannot possess any material causal interactions, direct or indirect physical interactions, between any relativistic phenomenon, any two or more exhaustive spatial pixels existing either in the relativistic realm or in the subatomic realm. So it's an acausal computational paradigm. In other words, the UCP is creating simultaneously a series of frames, and it's very profound because we realize that between one frame and another, the whole universe dissolves back into this UCP. So really, the universe that exists now is not the same universe that existed before, and it's not creating one frame cannot create the subsequent frame, but rather the UCP has, actually we'll talk about it, but has in storage what I call the multi-spatial temporal reservoir of all past, present, and multiple possible future frames. But in any event, it's not a cause and effect situation. The universe is being created, dissolved, recreated, and evolved by this UCP, which is the major, in a sense, driving force of the universe and the major reality behind the universe. And that's also a good point to talk about the two other profound new theoretical postulates, which they're actually very much related to each other. One is what I call the computational invariance principle or postulate, and the computational invariance principle, and the other one is the universal conscious reality. That's a fine element, a fine understanding, but it's very profound. It changes profoundly our understanding of the universe. Science's basic understanding of the universe. So the computational invariance principle is saying that since we realize that this UCP is the only principle that exists continuously, uniformly, consistently across the series of frames, whereas so during each consecutive frame, the UCP computes simultaneously all the points in the universe, and for each point it computes simultaneously. Remember, we spoke about the universal computational formula. So through this universal computational formula, the UCP computes simultaneously for each spatial pixel in the universe its four basic physical features of space, time, energy, and mass. So during the frames, the UCP creates the whole universe and all the spatial pixels and their four basic physical features of space, energy, time, and mass, and time. And in between any two consecutive universal frames, the UCP also exists, but it exists solely without the physical universe, without any space, time, energy, and mass. So the computational invariance principle tells us that when we contrast the consistent and uniform and continuous existence of the UCP, both during the frames in which it's creating and computing all the pixels in the universe, and in between the frames in which it exists without these four basic physical features, without all the spatial pixels in the universe. Therefore, the computational invariance principle postulate tells us there exists only one reality. What that one reality or one principle is the UCP. It exists uniformly and consistently, continuously, both during the frames in which it creates the universe with its four basic physical features of every exhaustive spatial pixel in the universe, and it also exists in between the frames without the physical universe. And we contrast that to the basic four physical features and all the spatial pixels of the universe, essentially the existence of the universe, which exists only during the frames as computed by the UCP, but the universe doesn't exist in between the frames. So the computational invariance principle is so profound. It essentially tells us that the universe and the basic four basic physical features of space, energy, mass, and time is not a solid material entity. The physical universe really is just a manifestation of this universal computational principle, and so the universe exists as a transient phenomenal manifestation of this UCP. And the complementary, or the second phase of that new realization, is the other postulate, which I call the universal consciousness reality. And it's just highlighting even more the fact that we only have one reality. There's only one reality behind the universe. That's what I call the universal consciousness reality. And the universal consciousness reality, or the same as the UCP, universal computational or consciousness principle, the universal conscious reality is telling us there's only one reality in the universe, which is this universal conscious reality, or UCP. It exists both during the frames in which it's creating the universe, and exists without the universe in between the frames. And in a sense, the physical universe, our bodies, the everything around us, the atoms, the stars, the galaxies, everything around us is really just a phenomenal, you may say illusory, or a phenomenal manifestation, an apparent manifestation of this universal conscious reality, which doesn't exist independently of this universal conscious reality. So in a sense, we've lost now, or we're transcending the old material causal assumption and perception of the universe as if the universe is a material causal solid reality, physical reality. We're discovering through this new God's physics paradigm of 21st century physics and science, and especially since it's been verified now, as I said, with two critical predictions, we're starting to wake up, in a sense, to a entirely new universe. That new universe is non-material, non-causal. It's really a continuous manifestation and a continuous process of evolution of this singular reality, the only reality that exists, which is this universal conscious reality. So that's a very profound change. And excuse me. Now, I'll just highlight the fact that, as I alluded earlier, first of all, this new God's physics paradigm is revolutionizing science. It's advancing science tremendously. Einstein was able to unify between space and time, energy and mass, the energy-mass equivalence, and he was able to, in general relativity theory, postulate that massive objects curve space and time, but it's still not a complete unification of those four basic physical features of space, energy, mass, and time. But in the new God's physics paradigm, we have this universal computational formula which actually integrates completely and meshes together the four basic physical features of space, energy, mass, and time as byproducts, computational byproducts, simultaneous computational byproducts of this singular UCP that's computing for every spatial pixel in the universe at this incredible rate of c squared divided by Planck's constant, which is 1.36 in the power of minus 50 many trillions of times per second. It's computing simultaneously the whole frame. For each frame and for each spatial pixel, it's computing simultaneously and integrating between space, energy, mass, and time as different computational integrative measures of this UCP's computation of the degree of change or lack of change across frames pertaining to the whole frame or pertaining to an object. Difficult to explain in a brief presentation, but we're getting the picture. So it's the first time in physics that the four basic physical features of space, energy, mass, and time are integrated. It's also the first time that the four basic forces of nature are integrated. It's related to that. So far, it's only been the three forces of the strong and weak nuclear forces, the electromagnetic force, and then gravity was left apart. That relates also to the ability of God's physics to integrate between quantum mechanics and general relativity theory. Again, general relativity theory has a lot to do with the gravitational force. So it's the first time that God's physics paradigm, or the computational unified field theory, is able to unify between the four basic physical features and the four basic forces of nature. And now we're advancing to understanding another profound two postulates or profound insights of this new God's physics paradigm. I give him one of them is what I call the reverse time Geula goal postulate or hypothesis, and I give the metaphor. Imagine a king. Let's take King Solomon planning to build the temple. And before he does that, he takes an architect, a well-known architect, that gives King Solomon a blueprint, an architectural blueprint of how the palace is going to look like in its final complete phase, creation. And so King Solomon would not summon the first construction workers. He would not place the first building block of this marvelous palace and actually temple before he has this complete blueprint. So in a sense, we would say that King Solomon is planning the whole development and build-up and completion of the temple from the end result, the goal, which is a beautiful, immaculate, divine temple. From that completed goal, he's actually going backwards to start creating and planning how we're going to build the temple in order to reach the complete temple, the immaculate temple. And an equivalence of that is this postulate, which I call the reverse time Geula goal postulate or hypothesis, essentially saying that the UCP, or universal conscious reality, has pre-planned the whole evolution of the universe from its inanimate matter through animate plants, then animals, then human beings, and then towards the whole goal, Geula goal of the whole evolution of the universe, which is the perfected, morally, spiritually, and even physical perfection of this Geula end goal of the universe. That Geula goal state, Geula is a term taken from the Jewish tradition, just denoting this perfected state of humanity in the world. And really that's this Geula goal state of humanity in the world is where we stand now. Actually, that's a very exciting development of this new God's physics paradigm. But essentially it's saying that the whole pre-planning of the universe by this universal consciousness principle or reality has planned to evolve the universe from this inanimate matter, animate plants, animate animals, and then animate human beings, and then humanity reaching that perfected Geula state. That perfected Geula state is a state in which science and humanity will recognize what we just have been speaking about, that there's only one reality, that truly there's only one reality that's underlying the whole universe. That's the universal consciousness reality. And that universal conscious reality is essentially the only reality behind the universe. And also that perfected Geula state is a state because we have another postulate about this universal conscious reality, which is all oneness, it's all unified. It also possesses a moral principle. We call it the dynamic equilibrium moral principle. And essentially it says that the UCP, or the universal conscious reality, has these characteristics of all goodness, of morality, of oneness. And the moral principle, the dynamic equilibrium moral principle, essentially tells us that since the goal of the pre-planned goal of the whole evolution of the universe is to reach that perfected Geula state, in which humanity, science and humanity, will recognize, will discover what we're discovering now with God's physics, that there's only one reality. That one reality is also unified, it's also moral, it's also all goodness. It wants to evolve the universe towards this perfected state. Therefore, it tells us, this is what I alluded earlier about the multi-spatial temporal reservoir of the universal consciousness reality or principle, in which every time a human being makes a moral choice to help another human being, that sets in motion, that selects by the UCP or UCR, universal conscious reality, it selects an equivalent future, one of multiple possible futures for that individual, that would echo, and in this case reinforce, his or her moral behavior. And vice versa, if a person, God forbid, chooses to act in an immoral way or a negative immoral way towards another human being, that would set in motion the UCP or the UCR selecting for that individual an equivalent negative situation, not as a punishment but as a means of correcting and raising the awareness of that individual, and gradually of all human beings, all humanity, that we're all interconnected. That we're all interconnected, that we're all integral parts and inseparable parts of this universal conscious reality. And so what we're realizing now is that the whole evolution of the universe has not happened by cause and effect, by material causality. The universe was not created by a Big Bang, initial nuclear event. Because even if there was such an event, the first picture could not create a cause and effect within it. The first picture could not create the second picture, the third picture, and even the billionth picture, because everything dissolves between one picture and another. And within a frame, universal frame, because everything is computed simultaneously, there cannot be cause and effect. So what we are led to understanding, a new understanding, profound understanding, is that we only have one reality, that's the universal conscious reality. That universal conscious reality manifests as the universe during the frames and remains without the universe in between the frames. It's pre-planned the whole evolution of the universe towards that perfected Geula state. In a sense, now science is entering this new Geula perfected state, because science is now realizing that we're all that there's only one reality, that's universal conscious reality, that reality is all goodness, is moral, cares about our moral choices, advances humanity towards that perfected Geula state. And now I think is the point where I want to explain briefly why this new scientific revolution, this new paradigmatic shift towards the new God's physics paradigm, which is being accepted by science, by scientists, and has been proven actually initially through these two critical predictions, verifications, as the new paradigm, the new satisfactory scientific paradigm for 21st century. So why is it important for humanity? Why is it important for all the viewers and readers, laymen, viewers and readers of God's Physics book, of these lectures? Why is it important? And the answer is very simple. First of all, once we realize that the whole plan, the whole goal, whole evolution of the universe is being guided by this moral all goodness, singular higher order universal conscious reality that cares about our moral choices, that leads humanity towards a perfected moral, spiritual and even physical state, that gives us great hope, especially during this time and age when we have this pandemic and many difficulties that humanity and human beings are passing through. And this gives us a whole new perspective. We understand that the world doesn't function by cause and effect. It really functions by our moral choices. It really functions by the universal conscious reality leading humanity towards that perfected state. And so it encourages, it reinforces our understanding that nothing in the universe happens by chance, that we're in a sense being guided, being cared for, being watched over, and being encouraged to open our eyes and realize that the whole reality, the whole universe is not physical, it's not material. It's really underlined, it's really a manifestation of this singular, higher ordered universal conscious reality. It encourages us to be moral. In Hasidic and Jewish tradition, and the great Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke about this many times, that we have this moral obligation for all human beings, what's called the 7 commandments, Noach commandments, essentially not stealing, not killing, recognizing this oneness of God, or in scientific terms, this universal consciousness reality. And so it gives us a great responsibility, it gives us great hope. We start transforming our understanding of the universe, we start opening our eyes and seeing the reality that we live within a guided and within a cared for universe, that really everything around us, the physical reality around us, is really underlined by this all goodness, moral, universal conscious reality, which cares about our moral choices, which cares about us, which does everything, every split second, every trillionth of a second, guides the universe. I won't speak about it now, but there's 10 hierarchical computational dimensions that are aimed, that are generated or assisting or part of the universal conscious reality computation of every consecutive frame. And we start living in a universe which we feel very confident, we feel very reassured. We understand that our choices, moral choices, make a big change, both for us personally in terms of one of the positive, God willing, futures that will be selected for us based on our moral choices. And also we realize that the universe as a whole is gravitating and is actually now entering a new era, which is in a sense could be called this Geula, goal, perfected state of the universe and humanity. So I think based on this presentation, we start realizing that God's physics new paradigm is the new satisfactory paradigm for 21st century physics and science more generally. We're getting a new hope and a new profound understanding that the universe is not random, it's not operating by cause and effect. It's being guided, watched over, evolved, and cared for by this all goodness, moral, singular reality that's manifesting as the universe and is evolving the universe and humanity specifically towards that perfected Geula state. So it's a great pleasure to present this presentation. It's a major breakthrough now in the world's and science's understanding of this new God's physics paradigm. I encourage people to read that book and to watch the presentations, because as I said at the beginning of this conversation, the new God's physics paradigm is not, it's a huge revolution in science. It's equivalent to Einstein's great revolution of the last century, and it replaces and embeds Einstein's general relativity theory and quantum mechanics as special cases within this new broader understanding, exactly as Einstein envisioned. But it also denotes and possesses extremely important ramifications for the whole of humanity, and therefore it's a great privilege to record this and to bring this to the attention of everybody, of the general public. Thank you very much.